Behind the seemingly ordinary moment of someone carrying a box down a city street, there is a story that will fundamentally change how you think about the invisible people who keep our world running, and what happens when the system realizes too late just how much it needed them all along. The autumn rain had that particular quality of cold that seeps through clothing and settles into bones, the kind that makes every step feel heavier than it should. Sarah Mitchell walked down 7th Avenue, carrying a cardboard box that had once held printer paper, now packed with 17 years of her professional life, reduced to objects small enough to fit in 18 inches of corrugated material. The box cut into her forearms where she held it, the bottom already softening from the moisture in the air, threatening to give way at any moment. Inside were 3 framed certificates that had once hung on her cubicle wall: a coffee mug with a faded logo from a systems training conference in Denver, a small succulent plant that had somehow survived her fluorescent-lit workspace for 6 years, and a handful of USB drives containing documentation she had meticulously maintained despite no one asking her to. Her feet ached in the professional flats she had worn, thinking this would be just another Tuesday, another day of arriving at 7 in the morning to run diagnostics on systems that most people in the building did not even know existed. The rain had soaked through the thin canvas material, and she could feel the cold water squishing between her toes with each step. Her hair, which she had pulled back into a neat ponytail that morning, now hung in wet strands around her face, and she could feel droplets running down the back of her neck, disappearing beneath the collar of her jacket. The sidewalk stretched ahead of her, concrete squares made slick and treacherous by the rain, reflecting the grey sky above in shallow puddles that she stepped around automatically. Other pedestrians hurried past, heads down against the weather, umbrellas tilted forward like shields. No one making eye contact, everyone locked in their own private urgency to get somewhere dry and warm. A taxi splashed through a puddle near the curb, sending up a spray of dirty water that barely missed her, and she shifted the box to one side, feeling the bottom sag dangerously. 17 years. She had been 26 when she started at Meridian Defense Systems, fresh from a technical program at a community college, hungry to prove herself in a field dominated by men with prestigious degrees from universities she could never have afforded. She had started in the basement, literally, in a windowless room filled with servers that hummed and clicked through the night, learning the systems from the ground up, while others her age were sleeping. She had learned to read the sounds the machines made, to know when a particular whir meant a cooling fan was about to fail, to recognize the subtle changes in temperature that indicated a power supply under stress. No one had taught her these things. The senior technician who was supposed to train her had retired 3 days after she started, and the department head had been too busy with budget meetings to notice that the new hire was essentially teaching herself by reading manuals and experimenting at 3 in the morning when no one else was around to see her make mistakes. So she had learned in the dark, in the cold, in the silence of machines. That did not judge her for not having the right credentials or the right connections. She had learned the old systems first, the ones installed in the 1990s that everyone said would be replaced soon but never were, the ones that ran on software so outdated that finding anyone who understood them was becoming impossible. She learned them because they were there, because they were part of the infrastructure, because someone needed to know how they worked. Then she learned the new systems as they came in, the modern interfaces that were supposed to make everything easier, but somehow made everything more fragile, more dependent on networks and connections and things that could fail in ways the old systems never did. By her 5th year, she was the only person in the building who understood how the old and new systems talked to each other, how data flowed from the ancient mainframes through conversion protocols she had written herself into the sleek modern dashboards that executives looked at during meetings. She had become invisible in her competence, the person nobody thought about until something went wrong. And then suddenly, everyone needed her immediately, urgently, as if the crisis had just appeared out of nowhere, rather than being the result of months of ignored warnings. The box shifted in her arms, and she stopped walking, setting it down on a low concrete wall outside a closed storefront to readjust her grip. Her fingers were numb from the cold and the pressure of holding the box, and she flexed them, trying to restore circulation. Through the store window, she could see her reflection, ghostly in the rain-streaked glass. and for a moment she barely recognized herself. When had she started looking so tired? When had the lines around her eyes become so pronounced? She picked up the box again, feeling the damp cardboard bend slightly under her fingers, and continued walking. 3 blocks to the subway station, then a 40-minute ride to her apartment in Queens. Then she would figure out what came next, though the shape of that future felt impossibly vague, like trying to see through fog. The firing had happened so quickly that her mind was still trying to process the sequence of events. She had been called into a conference room at 9:15, which was unusual because she was rarely called into conference rooms at all. Department head Marcus Webb had been there, along with someone from Human Resources whose name she immediately forgot, and someone else she did not recognize who sat in the corner taking notes on a laptop. Webb had not looked at her directly. He had looked at a point somewhere over her left shoulder while he spoke, his voice taking on that particular tone people use when they are reciting something they have memorized, something legal and careful and designed to prevent lawsuits rather than communicate actual meaning. There had been words about restructuring, about budgetary constraints, about the company moving in new directions that required different skill sets. None of it had made sense because the department was not being restructured. The budget had just been increased, and her skill set was literally irreplaceable. A fact she knew because she had spent the last 3 years training people who kept leaving for better jobs at companies that paid more and valued technical expertise. But none of that had mattered, because this was not actually about restructuring or budgets or skill sets. This was about what had happened 6 weeks ago, about what she had done, about the choice she had made that had been absolutely correct and absolutely unforgivable. It had started with an anomaly in the satellite communication system, something small that showed up in her routine morning diagnostics, a timing discrepancy of 0.003 seconds in the handshake protocol between the ground station and the satellite network. Most people would have ignored it. The system was still functioning. The discrepancy was within acceptable parameters, technically. But Sarah had not ignored it because she knew these systems, knew them the way a musician knows their instrument, and something was wrong. She had spent 2 days tracking the anomaly, going deeper into the system architecture, following the data through layers of protocols and interfaces that had been built by different contractors at different times with different standards. What she found made her blood run cold. Someone had inserted a backdoor into the authentication system, a small piece of code that would allow external access to the satellite control network. It was sophisticated, hidden in a way that suggested serious resources and serious expertise. It was also, based on the timestamps, something that had been there for at least 8 months. She had documented everything, created a detailed report with evidence and recommendations, and taken it to Webb. She had expected him to be alarmed, to immediately escalate to security, to bring in the FBI or whoever handled this kind of thing. Instead, he had gone pale, told her to delete the report, and said they would handle it internally. When she had pushed back, when she had said this was a national security issue and needed to be reported immediately, he had told her in very clear terms that she was overstepping her authority and that if she valued her job, she would forget she had ever seen anything. She had not forgotten. She had not deleted the report. She had instead sent it to the Department of Defense Inspector General's office, anonymously, through channels she had set up specifically because she had always known that someday she might need to report something that her employer did not want reported. 3 weeks later, investigators had shown up at Meridian Defense Systems. There had been meetings behind closed doors, people carrying boxes out of executive offices, and an atmosphere of barely controlled panic that had permeated the building for days. The back door had been closed, the contractor responsible had been identified and terminated, and there had been quiet acknowledgements that a serious breach had been prevented. Sarah had never been thanked. She had never been acknowledged. Instead, 6 weeks after sending that report, she had been fired for reasons that were carefully documented to have nothing to do with whistleblowing, nothing to do with reporting security breaches, nothing to do with anything that might give her grounds for a lawsuit. Just restructuring, just budget, just moving in new directions. The rain was falling harder now, and Sarah shifted the box to shield it slightly with her body, though she was not sure why she bothered. What did it matter if the certificates got wet? They were not going to help her get another job. In this industry, getting fired from a defense contractor raised questions. Even if the official reason was restructuring, people would wonder what she had done, what she had screwed up, whether she could be trusted. The truth would not help her because the truth made her look like a troublemaker, someone who went over their boss's head, someone who did not understand how things worked. She was half a block from the subway entrance when she felt it, a vibration in the ground that was wrong, that did not match the usual rhythm of city traffic and underground trains. It was a deeper frequency, something that resonated in her chest, and she stopped, walking, confused, trying to identify the source. The other pedestrians had stopped too, she realized, all of them looking around with the same puzzled expression, trying to understand what they were feeling. The vibration grew stronger, and now she could hear it too, a low rumbling that seemed to come from everywhere at once, building in intensity. The rain continued to fall, but the sound of it hitting the pavement was drowned out by this other sound, this approaching thunder that made the windows of nearby buildings rattle in their frames. Then someone pointed, and Sarah turned to look south down 7th Avenue, and what she saw made no sense at all. Military vehicles were coming up the street, not one or two, but a full convoy, heavy trucks with canvas-covered backs, smaller tactical vehicles, and at the front, 2 vehicles she recognized from news footage and action movies. Mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, MRAPs, massive angular things designed to survive explosions in war zones. They were moving fast, faster than seemed safe on wet city streets, and they were not slowing down. The convoy was accompanied by police motorcycles, sirens wailing, lights flashing, clearing traffic out of the way with urgent gestures. Cars pulled to the side, some mounting the curb in their haste to get out of the way. Pedestrians pressed back against buildings, and Sarah found herself doing the same, clutching her box against her chest as the vehicles roared past, close enough that she could feel the wind of their passage, could smell diesel exhaust and something else, something metallic and urgent, but they did not pass. The lead vehicles slowed, then stopped, right in front of where she stood. The vehicles behind them stopped too, creating a line that blocked the entire street. Soldiers were emerging from the backs of the trucks before they had fully stopped moving, men and women in combat uniforms carrying rifles, moving with practiced efficiency to establish a perimeter. They were not pointing their weapons at anyone, but the weapons were very clearly present, very clearly ready. An officer emerged from one of the MRAPs, a woman in her 40s with silver oak leaves on her collar marking her as a lieutenant colonel. She was followed by 2 more soldiers and someone in civilian clothes, a man in a dark suit who looked distinctly uncomfortable with the rain and the sudden military operation happening around him. The lieutenant colonel scanned the street, her eyes moving systematically across the faces of the gathered crowd, and when her gaze reached Sarah, it stopped. She said something to one of the soldiers next to her, and he nodded and started moving in Sarah's direction. Sarah's mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening, trying to connect this impossible military presence to anything in her life that would explain it. Had something happened at Meridian? Had the breach been worse than they thought? But why would they be looking for her here, on a random street in Manhattan? And how would they even know where to find her? The soldier reached her, and up close she could see he was young, maybe 25, with a name tape that read Morrison and eyes that were very serious. "Ma'am," he said, his voice professional and urgent. "Are you Sarah Mitchell?" She could not find her voice for a moment, could only nod, still holding the cardboard box with her 17 years of career inside it, getting heavier with rain. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me. The lieutenant colonel needs to speak with you immediately." "I don't understand," Sarah managed to say. "What's happening? What is this about?" "Ma'am, I'm not authorized to discuss that here. Please come with me." He was not touching her, was not threatening her, but there was an absolute certainty in his manner that this was not a request that could be declined. Sarah looked past him to where the lieutenant colonel was standing next to the MRAP, waiting, and for a moment, she considered running, just dropping the box and running, because nothing about this made sense, and sense was important to her, necessary to her, the foundation of how she understood the world. But she did not run. She followed Morrison through the crowd of onlookers, all of them staring, phones out, recording, and she could hear the murmur of speculation. People trying to guess what was happening, who she was, what she had done. The rain continued to fall, colder now, or maybe she was just more aware of it, more aware of everything, her senses heightened by adrenaline and confusion. The lieutenant colonel waited until Sarah was standing in front of her before speaking. "Miss Mitchell, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Reeves, United States Army. I need to ask you to come with us immediately. There's a situation that requires your specific expertise." "My expertise?" Sarah heard her own voice say, and it sounded strange to her, distant. "I was just fired. I don't work for Meridian anymore. Whatever this is, they have other people." "This isn't about Meridian," Reeves interrupted, and there was something in her voice, an edge of urgency that cut through Sarah's confusion. "And we don't want other people. We want you specifically. We need you." The man in the suit stepped forward. "Miss Mitchell, I'm Deputy Director Chen from the National Security Agency. What I'm about to tell you is classified, but given the circumstances, we don't have time for proper clearances. 6 hours ago, we lost contact with a critical military satellite. Not just lost contact, the satellite is still transmitting, but it's not responding to our commands. Someone has taken control of it." Sarah felt something shift in her chest, a cold realization beginning to form. "Which satellite?" "Keyhole 17, Chen said, and Sarah's breath caught because she knew that designation, knew what it meant. Keyhole satellites were reconnaissance assets, eyes in the sky that watched things the government needed to watch. And Keyhole 17 was one of the newest, one of the most capable, with resolution good enough to read a license plate from space. "Someone has control of a spy satellite," Sarah said slowly, understanding dawning with horrible clarity. "Not just control," Reeves said. "They've changed its trajectory. It's being repositioned over the western United States, specifically over several military installations and critical infrastructure sites. Into approximately 4 hours, it will be in position to begin detailed reconnaissance of facilities that are supposed to be beyond satellite observation due to classified countermeasures. But the encryption," Sarah said, her mind automatically going to technical details because that was where she lived. "In the details, in the architecture of systems. The control protocols are military grade, multiple layers. It should be impossible to—" She stopped, because suddenly she understood. The back door. The one she had found 6 weeks ago, the one that had been in the Meridian systems for 8 months before she discovered it. Meridian Defense Systems, which, among other contracts, provided ground station support for military satellite operations. "You found it," Chen said, watching her face. 6 weeks ago, you found the back door that was inserted into the ground station control systems. You reported it. It was closed. The contractor responsible was identified. But what you didn't know, what we didn't know until this morning, was that the back door wasn't the only thing they installed. They also mapped the entire satellite control architecture, documented every protocol, every security measure, every fail-safe, and then they waited. "They waited for me to be gone," Sarah said, and it was not a question. "They waited for the person who found them the first time to be removed from the system." Reeves nodded. "Your termination was processed 4 days ago. The satellite was compromised this morning. We don't think that's a coincidence." Sarah's hands were shaking, and she realized she was still holding the cardboard box, this absurd object that suddenly seemed to represent everything wrong about the world, about systems that valued politics over competence, about organizations that punished the people who tried to protect them. She set it down on the wet sidewalk, not caring anymore what happened to it. "Why me?" she asked. "You have the NSA, you have military cyber units, you have people with clearances and resources, and we have people who are very good at what they do," Chen interrupted. "But the satellite control system is a hybrid architecture, old and new systems integrated in ways that were never properly documented. The contractors who built it are gone, bought out by other companies, and the documentation is incomplete. We have people trying to reverse engineer the control protocols, but they're running out of time. You're the only person who has demonstrated the ability to understand how all the pieces fit together, how the old systems talk to the new one. You wrote conversion protocols that nobody else understood. You found a back door that our security audits missed. We need that expertise, and we need it now. Sarah looked at the convoy, at the soldiers standing in the rain, at the impossible situation that had materialized out of nowhere street in Manhattan, while she was carrying her belongings in a cardboard box. She thought about Marcus Webb and his carefully worded termination, about the years she had spent learning systems that nobody else cared about the choice she had made to report a security breach, knowing it would probably end her career. "If I help you," she said slowly, "what happens after? Do I get my job back? Do I get an apology? Do I get anything?" Reeves looked at her with something that might have been respect. "I can't promise you anything about your job. That's not my call. What I can tell you is that if you don't help us, there's a very real chance that classified information about military installations and operations will be compromised. People could die. National security will be damaged in ways that will take years to repair. And if you do help us, if we succeed, there will be people at very high levels who will know what you did." It was not a satisfying answer, but it was an honest one, and Sarah appreciated that more than she would have expected. She looked down at the cardboard box on the sidewalk, at the certificates and the coffee mug and the plant that had survived 6 years in fluorescent light. Then she looked back at Reeves. "I'll need access to the ground station systems, full administrative access. I'll need the original system architecture documentation, whatever still exists. I'll need a workspace with multiple monitors and no interruptions. And I'll need someone to get me coffee, because I haven't eaten since this morning and I'm probably going to be at this for a while." Reeves smiled, just slightly. "We have a facility 20 minutes from here. Everything you need is either there or will be there by the time we arrive. Let's move." Sarah followed her to the MR app, and one of the soldiers opened the rear door. The interior was surprisingly spacious, with seats along both sides and equipment racks mounted to the walls. It smelled like metal and gun oil, and something else she could not identify. She climbed in, and Reeves climbed in after her, followed by Chen and 2 soldiers who took positions near the door. The vehicle started moving before the door was fully closed, and Sarah could hear the convoy reforming around them, the other vehicles falling into line. Through the small, armored windows, she could see pedestrians still watching, still filming, and she wondered what they thought they were seeing, what story they would tell themselves about the woman who had been standing in the rain with a cardboard box and then climbed into a military vehicle and disappeared. "How did you find me?" she asked Reeves. As the MRAP accelerated through the city streets, the ride surprisingly smooth despite the vehicle's size. "We've been tracking your phone for the last 3 hours," Reeves said matter-of-factly. "Once we realized we needed you, we put every available resource into locating you. When you left your apartment this morning, we knew. When you went to Meridian, we knew. When they fired you, we knew. We were already en route when you left the building. You watched them fire me and didn't intervene? We didn't know we needed you until after that happened. The satellite was compromised at 0900 hours. We didn't identify the connection to the Meridian back door until 1100. By then you were already walking down 7th Avenue, and we made the decision that intercepting you in transit was faster than trying to go through proper channels." Sarah processed this, understanding the calculus that had led to military vehicles screaming through Manhattan to grab a recently fired technician off the street. It was the kind of decision that only got made when people were desperate, when normal procedures had failed and time was running out. "Tell me everything," she said. "I need to understand the full scope of what's happening." Chen pulled out a tablet and brought up a series of displays. Keyhole 17 was launched 8 months ago as part of a Constellation upgrade. It has advanced optical and infrared sensors, synthetic aperture radar, and signal intelligence capabilities that make it one of our most valuable reconnaissance assets. At 0900 hours this morning, during a routine telemetry check, ground control noticed anomalies in the satellite's response patterns. By 0930, they had lost command authority completely. The satellite stopped responding to authorized commands, but continued normal operations otherwise, maintaining orbit, power, thermal control. Everything except command response. He swiped to another screen, showing orbital trajectories. At 1000 hours, the satellite began a series of maneuvers using its propulsion system. These maneuvers are moving it into a position over the western United States, specifically over Nevada, New Mexico, and parts of California and Arizona. That area contains multiple military installations, including Nellis Air Force Base, White Sands Missile Range, Edwards Air Force Base, and several classified facilities that I'm not going to name. They're going to photograph everything, Sarah said, understanding immediately. Every classified facility, every piece of equipment, every defensive position, and then they're going to sell that information or use it themselves. That's the assessment, Chen confirmed. And because Keyhole 17 has synthetic aperture radar, they can do this through cloud cover, at night, under conditions where optical satellites would be useless. We're talking about a complete intelligence compromise of some of our most sensitive military assets. What about the self-destruct? Sarah asked. Don't these satellites have a termination system? They do, Reeves said grimly. But the termination command is part of the same control protocol that's been compromised. We try to send the destruct signal. There's a very real chance they'll intercept it and either block it or use the same pathway to cause damage to other satellites in the constellation. We can't risk it. The MRAP turned sharply, and Sarah grabbed a handhold to steady herself. Through the window, she could see they were heading toward the waterfront, toward an area of industrial buildings and warehouses that looked largely abandoned. Where are we going? She asked. NSA maintains a facility here, Chen said. Officially, it's a telecommunications research station. Actually, it's a backup control center for several satellite systems, including Keyhole 17. When the primary ground station at Fort Meade lost command authority, we shifted operations here. It hasn't helped. We still can't regain control, but it gives us a secure location to work from. The convoy pulled into a fenced compound, and Sarah saw what looked like an old warehouse from the outside, but with significantly more security than any warehouse should have. Armed guards at the gate, cameras everywhere, and a general atmosphere of serious people doing serious work. The MRAP stopped in front of a loading dock, and the door opened. "This way," Reeves said, and Sarah followed her out into the rain, which had not let up at all. They went through a heavy security door, down a corridor that smelled like new paint and old concrete, and into an elevator that descended for what felt like several floors. When the elevator doors opened, Sarah found herself in a facility that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. The space was huge, a former basement or sub-basement that had been converted into a high-tech operations center. Dozens of workstations arranged in clusters, each with multiple monitors, connected by cables and fiber optics that ran along the floor and up the walls. The lighting was bright, but somehow not harsh, and the air had that particular cool, dry quality of serious climate control. People were everywhere, some in military uniforms, some in civilian clothes, all focused on their screens with the intensity of people who knew they were racing against time. The sound was a constant low murmur of voices, keyboard clicks, and the hum of electronics. A man in an Air Force uniform approached them, a major based on his rank insignia. "Colonel Reeves, the workspace is ready. We've set up Station 7 with administrative access to all available systems." "This is Miss Mitchell," Reeves said. "Give her whatever she needs. If she asks for something and you're not sure you can provide it, the answer is yes, and you figure out how. Clear?" "Yes, ma'am." Station 7 turned out to be a curved desk with 6 monitors arranged in a semicircle, a high-end workstation that was already logged in and showing system dashboards. Sarah sat down, and immediately her hands went to the keyboard, muscle memory taking over, fingers finding the familiar positions. The first monitor showed the satellite's current telemetry, position, velocity, power status, thermal readings. Everything still nominal, except for the one crucial thing, command response. The second monitor had the control protocol architecture, a diagram that Sarah recognized immediately because she had helped design parts of it, back when Meridian had the contract for ground station integration. The third monitor showed command logs, the history of every instruction sent to the satellite and its responses. Sarah scrolled through them, seeing the normal pattern of routine operations, and then at 0900 hours, the pattern changed. Commands were acknowledged, but not executed. Status queries were answered, but with data that did not quite match reality. It was like talking to someone who was pretending to listen, but actually ignoring everything you said. "This is sophisticated," Sarah said. Not to anyone in particular, just thinking out loud. They're not just blocking commands, they're simulating normal responses to make it look like everything is fine. If the ground controllers weren't paying close attention, they might not have noticed for hours. Chen had followed them to the station. We think they've been planning this for months, possibly since they first inserted the back door at Meridian. They mapped the entire control system, identified every vulnerability, and built a custom exploit designed specifically for this satellite. Sarah pulled up the system architecture on the fourth monitor, the detailed diagram showing how commands flowed from ground stations through multiple layers of encryption and authentication before reaching the satellite. The architecture was complex, built on principles of defense in depth, multiple independent systems that all had to agree before any command was executed. "Show me the back door you found," she said to Chen. "The original one, the code itself." Chen pulled out his tablet and transferred files to her workstation. Sarah opened them, seeing code that was elegant and vicious, a small insertion into the authentication system that would allow someone with the right key to bypass normal security checks. It had been hidden in a routine maintenance update, disguised as a performance optimization, and it would have been nearly impossible to detect without understanding the system at a very deep level. But Sarah did understand the system at that level. She had spent years learning every component, every interface, every conversion protocol. She could see how the back door worked, how it intercepted authentication requests and inserted false approvals. And she could see something else, something the NSA analysts had apparently missed. "This isn't just a back door," she said slowly, her fingers moving across the keyboard, pulling up additional code segments. "It's also a mapping tool. Every time a legitimate command went through the system, the back door was recording it, documenting the exact sequence of authentication steps, the encryption keys, the timing patterns. They were learning how the system worked by watching it operate normally. "We know that," Chen said. "That's how they were able to build their exploit." "No, you're not understanding," Sarah said, her mind racing now, seeing patterns, seeing connections. They weren't just learning how to send commands. They were learning how the system validates commands, how it decides what's legitimate and what's not. And if I'm right about this, she stopped, pulling up another screen, diving into the authentication protocol code, going deeper than the surface level, down into the core validation routines. And there it was, hidden in a section of code that had been written 10 years ago and never updated, a secondary validation check that almost nobody knew existed because it was part of the original system architecture that had been largely replaced by newer security measures. "They don't know about this," Sarah said, feeling a surge of something that might have been excitement or might have been fear. "The secondary validation protocol, it's in the old system, the one nobody uses anymore. But it's still there, still active, still checking every command that comes through. They mapped the modern security systems, but they didn't go deep enough to find the legacy protocols." Reeves had come over to stand behind her. "What does that mean?" "It means we have a back door of our own," Sarah said. "If I can craft a command that uses the old validation protocol, bypassing the modern security systems they've compromised, we might be able to regain control. But it's going to be complicated because the old system uses different encryption, different command syntax, different everything. And I'm going to have to do it without triggering any of the compromised security measures because if they detect what we're doing, they'll shut us out completely." "How long will it take?" Chen asked. Sarah looked at the screens, at the architecture diagrams, at the code that represented years of work by dozens of engineers who had never imagined their systems would be used in a scenario like this. "I don't know. Hours, at least, maybe longer. And there's no guarantee it will work. If they've thought of this too, if they've found the old validation protocols, we're done. But you think you can do it," Reeves said. And it was not quite a question. Sarah thought about the cardboard box sitting on a sidewalk somewhere in Manhattan, getting soaked by rain. She thought about Marcus Webb and his careful words about restructuring and budget constraints. She thought about 17 years of learning systems that nobody else cared about, of becoming invisible in her competence, of being the person nobody thought about until something went wrong. "I can do it," she said. "Get me that coffee." The next 4 hours were the most intense of Sarah's professional life, and that was saying something considering she had once kept a critical power system running through a hurricane by manually overriding safeties and routing power through circuits that were never designed to handle that load. But this was different. This was not about keeping something running. It was about taking back control of something that had been stolen, and doing it in a way that would not alert the people who had stolen it. She started by mapping out the old validation protocol in detail, pulling up documentation that was literally stored on paper in filing cabinets because it was so old that nobody had bothered to digitize it. A young soldier whose name she never learned brought her boxes of yellowed technical manuals, and she went through them page by page, reconstructing the command syntax and encryption methods that had been state-of-the-art in the 1990s and were now so obsolete that modern security systems largely ignored them. The old system used a completely different approach to encryption, something called a symmetric key algorithm that required both the sender and receiver to have the same key. The modern system used asymmetric encryption with public and private keys, much more secure, but also much more complex. The people who had compromised the satellite had focused on breaking the modern system, and Sarah was betting they had never even looked at the old one. But using the old system meant she had to find the encryption keys, and that was a problem, because they should have been rotated years ago as part of standard security practice. Should have been. But Sarah knew that in practice, legacy systems often kept using the same keys for decades, because changing them required coordination across multiple agencies, and nobody wanted to take responsibility for potentially breaking something that was still working. She found the keys in a database that was supposed to be retired but was still running on a server in a corner somewhere, maintained by inertia and the principle that you don't turn off something if you don't know what it's connected to. The keys were exactly where they should be, unchanged since 2003, and Sarah felt a mixture of relief and horror that something so critical had been left untouched for so long. With the keys in hand, she started building a command sequence, writing code that would authenticate using the old protocol, bypass the compromised modern systems, and send instructions directly to the satellite's control processor. It was like trying to speak a forgotten language, piecing together words from old dictionaries, hoping the grammar was correct, knowing that one mistake would alert the people who had control and give them time to block her. Around her, the operations center continued its work. Dozens of people trying their own approaches to the problem, running simulations, testing theories, all of it coordinated by Reeves and Chen, who moved between stations, checking progress, making decisions. Sarah was vaguely aware of all this activity, but most of her attention was focused on the code she was writing, on the architecture diagrams she was referencing, on the careful step-by-step process of building something that had to work perfectly the first time. Coffee appeared at her elbow at regular intervals, brought by people whose faces she barely registered. Someone put a sandwich next to her keyboard, and she ate it without tasting it, her eyes never leaving the screens. Time became fluid, marked only by the countdown clock on one of the monitors, showing how long until the satellite would be in position over the military installations, how long until the window for action closed. At hour 3, she hit a problem. The old validation protocol required a hardware authentication token, a physical device that generated one-time codes synchronized with the satellite's internal clock. These tokens had been issued to authorized operators back when the system was built, but Sarah did not have one and did not know where to find one or even if they still existed. She brought the problem to Chen, who disappeared for 20 minutes and came back with a small device that looked like a calculator from the 1980s. "Last one we could find," he said. "It was in a storage facility in Maryland. We had it helicoptered here." Sarah synchronized the token with the satellite's clock using timestamps from the telemetry data, and the device started generating codes. Each code was valid for exactly 60 seconds, and she would need to use one as part of her command sequence, timing it perfectly to match when the command reached the satellite's processor. At hour 4, she was ready. The command sequence was complete, tested in simulation, verified against every piece of documentation she could find. It would authenticate using the old protocol, bypass the compromised security layers, and send a direct instruction to the satellite's control processor to reject all commands, except those coming through the legacy system. Once that was done, they could use the old protocol to send additional commands, including one to reset the satellite's trajectory back to its original position. But she had one chance. If the command failed, if there was any error in her code or her understanding of the system, the people who had control would know someone was trying to take it back, and they would lock everything down. There would be no second attempt. She explained all this to Reeves and Chen, showing them the code, the logic, the risks. They listened without interrupting, and when she was done, Reeves asked the only question that mattered. "What's your confidence level?" Sarah thought about 17 years of learning systems, of understanding how pieces fit together, of finding problems that nobody else saw. She thought about the back door she had discovered, about the report she had written, about the choice she had made that had cost her everything. 80%, she said, and it was an honest assessment, higher than she would have given for most things, but not certain, never certain when you were dealing with systems this complex. Reeves nodded. "That's good enough. Do it." Sarah's hands were steady as she positioned them over the keyboard. Around her, the operations center had gone quiet, everyone aware that something critical was happening, that the moment they had been building toward had arrived. On the main screen, the satellite's position was shown, moving steadily toward the critical window. She typed the first part of the command sequence, the authentication header using the old protocol syntax. Then she paused, waiting for the hardware token to generate the next code. The device beeped softly, and a 6-digit number appeared on its small screen. She typed it in, knowing she had 58 seconds before it expired. The rest of the command followed, each character precise, each parameter exactly what the old system expected. At the end, she added the control instruction, the command that would reject all modern protocol commands and accept only legacy ones. Her finger hovered over the enter key. "Sending now," she said, and pressed the key. The command went out, transmitted from the facility's antenna array, traveling at the speed of light to the satellite 200 miles above the Earth. The round trip time for a response would be approximately 0.4 seconds. Sarah watched the command log, seeing her instruction appear in the queue, seeing it transmit, and then waiting for the response that would tell her whether she had succeeded or failed. 0.4 seconds passed, then 0.5, then 0.6. The satellite's telemetry continued to show normal operations, but there was no acknowledgement of her command, no indication that anything had changed. "It didn't work," someone said, and Sarah heard the defeat in their voice. But she was still watching the telemetry, watching the patterns, and she saw something, a tiny change in the data stream, a momentary hiccup in the status updates that lasted for exactly 0.003 seconds. "Wait," she said. "Something happened. Look at the timing." She pulled up a detailed view of the telemetry stream, zooming in on the exact moment her command had been received. There it was, a brief interruption in the normal pattern, so short that the standard monitoring tools had not flagged it, but it was there. "The satellite processed the command," Sarah said, her heart racing now. "It's in the queue, waiting for validation. The old protocol requires a secondary confirmation, a follow-up command that verifies the first one. I need to send it now." She typed the confirmation command, another sequence using the old syntax, another code from the hardware token. This time, she did not hesitate, did not pause, just sent it immediately. The response came back in 0.41 seconds, and it was the most beautiful thing Sarah had ever seen. A simple acknowledgement in the old protocol format, confirming that the command had been accepted and executed. The satellite had rejected all modern protocol commands and was now listening only to the legacy system. "We have control," she said, and her voice was shaking. "We have control." The operations center erupted in cheers and applause, people standing up, hugging each other, the tension of the last several hours releasing all at once. But Sarah was already typing the next command, the one that would reset the satellite's trajectory, moving it back to its original position over the Atlantic where it was supposed to be. The command went out, was acknowledged, and on the main screen, the satellite's projected path began to change, the line showing its future position shifting away from the military installations and back toward its proper orbit. It would take several hours for the maneuver to complete, but the crisis was over. Reeves came over and put a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Outstanding work, Miss Mitchell. You just prevented a major intelligence disaster." Sarah leaned back in her chair, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had been keeping her going for the last 4 hours, draining away all at once. Her hands were shaking, and she clasped them together to keep them still. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we secure the satellite using the old protocol," Chen said. "We'll rotate the encryption keys, update the authentication systems, and make sure nobody can pull this trick again. And we'll be hunting the people who did this, though that's a different department's problem." "I meant what happens to me," Sarah said. Reeves and Chen exchanged a glance, and Sarah saw something pass between them, some unspoken communication. Then Reeves said, "I think you should come with us. There are some people who need to meet you." The Pentagon was not what Sarah had expected, though she was not sure what she had expected. The building was huge, obviously, 5 sides with 5 rings and 5 floors, but it was also somehow bureaucratic and ordinary, full of people in uniforms and suits walking purposefully through corridors that all looked the same. She followed. Reeves and Chen through security checkpoints and elevators, past conference rooms and offices, until they reached a door with no markings except a number. Inside was a conference room with a long table, and seated at the table were people who made Sarah nervous just by being in the same room as them. A 3-star general whose name tape read Morrison, a woman in civilian clothes who introduced herself as being from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and a man in a Navy uniform, with enough ribbons on his chest to suggest he had been in combat more times than Sarah wanted to think about. "Miss Mitchell," General Morrison said, gesturing to a chair, "please sit down. We've been briefed on what happened today, and we wanted to speak with you personally." Sarah sat, very aware that she was still wearing the clothes she had put on that morning, now wrinkled and still slightly damp from the rain. She had not showered, had not slept, had not done anything except work for the last several hours, and she probably looked terrible. "You prevented a significant intelligence compromise," the woman from ODNI said. "The satellite you recovered would have provided detailed reconnaissance of some of our most sensitive military installations. The damage that information could have caused is difficult to quantify, but it would have been substantial." "I just did what needed to be done," Sarah said, and immediately felt stupid for saying something so cliché. But Morrison smiled. "That's exactly the attitude we need. Miss Mitchell, we've been reviewing your file, including your work at Meridian Defense Systems, and the circumstances of your termination. We are aware that you reported a security breach that your employer wanted to ignore, and that you were subsequently fired in retaliation. They said it was restructuring," Sarah said automatically. "They lied," Morrison said bluntly, "and we're going to deal with that. But right now I want to talk about your future. The military and intelligence community need people with your skills, people who understand complex systems and have the moral courage to do the right thing, even when it's difficult. We'd like to offer you a position." Sarah blinked. "A position?" "As a civilian technical consultant to the Department of Defense," the woman from ODNI said. "You'd be working on satellite systems, ground control architecture, security protocols, the kind of work you've been doing but with proper support and recognition. The pay is competitive, the benefits are excellent, and you'd be doing work that matters. You'd also be working with people who understand the value of what you do," Chen added. "No more being invisible. No more being the person nobody thinks about until something breaks." Sarah looked around the table, at these serious people who were offering her something she had never expected. Recognition for skills that had been taken for granted for so long. It was tempting, incredibly. Tempting, but there was something else, something that needed to be addressed. "What about Meridian?" she asked. "What about Marcus Webb and the people who fired me for doing the right thing?" Morrison's expression hardened. "Meridian Defense Systems is currently under investigation for multiple security violations, including the failure to properly respond to your initial report of the back door. They're going to lose their government contracts, and several executives, including Marcus Webb, are facing potential criminal charges for obstruction and retaliation against a whistleblower. That company is done. And you," the Navy officer said, speaking for the first time, "are going to be the person who brought them down. The story is going to come out, Miss Mitchell. We can't keep something like this quiet, not with military convoys stopping traffic in Manhattan." The media is already asking questions, and when we give them answers, your name is going to be attached to a story about courage and competence and doing the right thing when the system failed. Sarah thought about the cardboard box she had been carrying, about walking down 7th Avenue in the rain, about 17 years of being invisible. And then she thought about what had happened today, about being found, about being needed, about proving that the skills she had spent so long developing actually mattered. "I'll take the position," she said. The press conference happened 2 days later, and Sarah stood at a podium in the Pentagon briefing room, flanked by General Morrison and Deputy Director Chen, facing a room full of reporters and cameras. She wore a new suit that had been purchased for her by someone whose job apparently included making sure people looked professional for important events, and she had notes prepared by a public affairs officer who had coached her on how to speak to the media. But when the time came to speak, she ignored the notes and just told the truth. She told them about finding the back door in the Meridian systems, about reporting it, about being fired for doing so. She told them about being grabbed off the street by a military convoy, about being brought to a facility where she worked for hours to regain control of a compromised satellite. She told them about the old systems that nobody thought about anymore, the ones she had spent years learning, and how that knowledge had made the difference between success and failure. The reporters asked questions, lots of questions, and she answered them as honestly as she could without revealing classified information. Yes, she had been fired in retaliation for whistleblowing. Yes, Meridian defense systems had failed to properly secure critical infrastructure. Yes, she believed that people who did the right thing should be protected, not punished. And then a reporter asked the question she had been both hoping for and dreading. "Miss Mitchell, what do you want people to take away from this story?" Sarah thought about that for a moment, about everything that had happened, about all the people like her who worked in invisible roles, who kept systems running, who knew things that nobody else knew. "I want people to understand that competence matters," she said finally, "that the people who do the technical work, the unglamorous work, the work that nobody notices until something goes wrong, those people are important. And I want organizations to understand that when someone tells you there's a problem, when someone raises a concern about security or safety or ethics, you should listen to them, not punish them for speaking up, because someday you might need that person, and if you've driven them away, if you've fired them or silenced them, you're going to regret it." The press conference ended, and Sarah walked out of the briefing room into a hallway where Reeves was waiting. "Well done," Reeves said. "You're going to be famous, you know. People are already calling you a hero on social media." Sarah made a face. "I'm not a hero. I just did my job." "That's what makes you a hero," Reeves said. "You did your job when nobody else could, and you did it even though the system had failed you. That's heroism, whether you want to call it that or not." 3 months later, Sarah sat in her new office in a building in suburban Virginia, surrounded by monitors and technical manuals and colleagues who actually understood what she did and why it mattered. She was working on a project to modernize satellite control systems, to replace the patchwork of old and new technologies with something coherent and secure, something that would not be vulnerable to the kind of attack that had almost succeeded. It was satisfying work, the kind of work she had always wanted to do, building systems properly instead of constantly fixing other people's mistakes. And she was no longer invisible. People knew her name now, knew what she had done, and they treated her with a respect that she had earned but never received at Meridian. Marcus Webb had been charged with obstruction of justice and retaliation against a whistleblower. The trial was ongoing, but the outcome seemed certain. Meridian Defense Systems had lost all its government contracts and was in the process of declaring bankruptcy. The executives who had prioritized politics over security were facing consequences finally, and Sarah felt a satisfaction in that, though it was tempered by the knowledge that it had taken a crisis to make it happen. Her phone rang, and she answered it to find General Morrison on the line. "Miss Mitchell, I wanted to let you know that the President is going to present you with the Intelligence Star next month. It's one of the highest civilian awards for intelligence work. You should be proud." Sarah thought about the cardboard box in the rain, about being fired, about walking down a street carrying 17 years of her life in her arms. And then she thought about standing in the Pentagon briefing room about telling the truth, about the letter she had received from a young woman who said Sarah's story had inspired her to pursue a career in technical systems. "Thank you, sir," she said. "I am proud, not just of what I did, but of what it represents. That competence matters, that doing the right thing matters, that the system can work, even when it fails at first." "That's exactly right," Morrison said. "And that's why we need more people like you, Miss Mitchell. People who understand that the work matters more than the recognition, but who deserve the recognition anyway." After the call ended, Sarah sat in her office, looking at the monitors showing system architectures and data flows, the kind of complex technical information that most people would find incomprehensible. But she understood it. She had always understood it. And now, finally, that understanding was valued the way it should have been all along. She thought about writing something, maybe a guide for other technical professionals about how to navigate organizations that did not value their expertise, about how to know when to speak up and when to document and when to go over people's heads. But that could wait. Right now, she had work to do, systems to build, problems to solve. Outside her window, the sun was setting over Virginia, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, and Sarah allowed herself a moment to just look at it, to appreciate it, before turning back to her monitors and the work that waited there. She had been invisible for 17 years, and then for one day, she had been exactly what the world needed. And now she was building something that would last, something that would make the world a little bit safer, a little bit more secure. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.